Tonight we're going to talk about what's the difference between abuse and dependence and how drugs and alcohol really affect the brain and the body and why the first 2 years of recovery are so hard. Because if you can start to understand that a little bit more, you can start to learn how to, when you get cravings or thoughts about using, you can normalize it, but also how to manage it better. And so just whatever your first name is and your, I don't like the phrase drug of choice, because if you're a late stage addict like I was, it wasn't a choice anymore. I just took whatever was around, right? Like I prefer cocaine and methamphetamine. I'm a meth freak, okay, so like, if I couldn't get that, I would drink, smoke pot, do, you know what, like that was my drug of preference. But if I couldn't get that, I would have to have something else, right? Okay, that's a late stage addict, okay? So my drug of preference was any kind of stimulant. Cocaine, methamphetamine. We didn't have crack back when I got sober in '85. They didn't have crack yet. So it didn't come out to, it was just starting, okay? But it was more, people did more mainlining back then, okay? Like they smoked cocaine, but they made it themselves, right? And it was like, remember the freebasing and the ether and all that kind of, people would blow themselves up. Like, who was that? Richard Pryor, remember? Like, you know, that, yeah. Well, he caught himself on fire. You remember that? Like, remember that show, like where he like took that lighter and he said, "I know y'all were making fun of me, right?" Because he lit that lighter and he goes, "What is this, Richard Pryor?" Right, running down the street. Remember that movie? So that was mine. I always like to start this off with this lecture. We're going to talk about like asking this one question: is what do you think is the hardest drug to quit? Heroin. Alcohol. Cigarettes. Alcohol? Cigarettes? Okay, come on in. So, right. It's usually whatever your last drug is. It's usually whatever the last thing you have in your stash, right? The last thing you're using. And it's different for each person. It's usually whatever your favorite drug is whatever's the hardest one to quit. Because you can get as addicted to like crack or as addicted to alcohol, but it might take you longer to become a late stage alcoholic than it does to become a crackhead, just because of the different ways that crack affects the body. Okay, you don't have to work as long to get as addicted. So my dad's an alcoholic, and he's 77, and he's still drinking. And he, like people always say, you know what? We still don't know how he's still alive. Like we have no idea how he's like pickled, I think, you know. But I asked him one time, and I said, you know, Dad, it's like, how hard is it for you to even think about quitting alcohol? He goes, I just can't even imagine. I can't even imagine my life without it. He loves it so much. He has a relationship with it, right? He's invested 50-something years in his relationship with alcohol. And he says, I don't understand people that say quitting alcohol is easy or easier than cocaine. Because I've worked in a lot of treatment centers and been in a lot of treatment centers, and cocaine addicts are notorious for coming in and saying, our addiction's worse than alcohol. And I said, no, you just get there faster, right? You just get there a whole lot faster. And, you know, you're selling everything in the house after 9 months, where it might take an alcoholic years to get to that place. Okay, so, you know, we had a woman in treatment once that was like, all these people were sitting around the room, and she's telling her story, right? And she was the only woman in treatment at that time. So she's telling her story, and women get like different expectations placed on them, you know, like, and so if they come to treatment, they don't get as much support. 9 times out of 10, when a woman comes to treatment, the man in her life will leave her. 9 times out of 10, if a man comes into treatment, the woman most of the time stays, if the man stays in recovery. Okay, so they get less support. And so she's sitting telling her story, and her husband had been shot and killed in a factory up in like Woodburn or something like that. That's how she got addicted, and that she had 6 boys. And he was a big manager, he was all that kind of stuff. And she went from having all this money to having to work and manage kids and do all this other kind of stuff. So she was getting stressed out, right? So a friend of hers one day said, you look tired. And she goes, yeah. And she goes, here's a little cocaine, just do a couple of bumps, and you know, you'll be able. And she said, man, I could like get done, Chris. So she's telling the group, and then she started off doing that, and then somebody like one day said, hey, try a little crack. Well, she was off and running. And within 9 months of never using, to 9 months later, she was like selling everything in her house, and then she got busted. Her kids were taken by CPS, all this, so she had to do all this work, and she came into treatment. So we're sitting around telling this, and all the men in group started jumping on her and going, what kind of mother are you? And and then one guy said it, and then the other guys were going, yeah, what's up with you? Why are you like doing this? And I go, hey, time out, man. I said, why is her addiction worse? And there was a guy in the group that he was, you remember when GM moved here? Okay, that's when crack really took off in Fort Wayne, because that pipeline came right down from Detroit down to here. That's when we started seeing, like, I worked at Charter Beacon Hospital, and remember when it was Charter Beacon, and now it's Parkview Behavioral Health, okay? I worked back there in 90 and to 95, and that's when we saw, like, crack just take off. And people were coming in, like this woman selling everything that she had. I mean, she literally backed up like a U-Haul up to her house to go down and sell shit down in the down the hood, right? She sold her car to get hitched, So that's how bad she got. So this guy was there for GM, and we had a contract with GM, and it was his 9th time in treatment. His 9th time for a 30-day treatment. Back then they did 30 days. Now they just detox and get you out, right? They just detox and get you out the door. But back then they had 30-day treatments. So he had spent 9 months, basically. This was his 9th time through treatment. And he's the one that said to, what kind of mother are you? And I said, hey, you've been getting high or drinking for the last 30 years? This is your 9th time in treatment. I called your wife and your kids. They won't even come into treatment anymore with you. They won't come for the family day. I said, who's done more damage? You over 30 years or her in the last 9 months? I said, it's her first time in treatment. I said, why is her addiction worse than your addiction? It just took you, like, what's so hard about you quitting alcohol? Because a cocaine addict over here will say, your alcohol addiction isn't as powerful as my cocaine addiction. But you can't tell my dad that, right? He's 77, he's still drinking, he can't imagine his life without it. And people drink themselves to death, right? Okay, cirrhosis, all those other kind of things, the kind of things that happen to you. So, where you're at when you come in makes it a lot harder about whether or not you're going to be able to stay clean and sober or not. So there's a continuum here. There's from using to abuse to dependence. Once you cross the line from like use to over to abuse, it's hard to go back to be a user, just a person that uses. Once you cross the line into dependence, your brain chemistry and your brain structure is different than a person that just maybe abuses alcohol or drugs here. And some people don't have to work as hard to get dependent or have all the symptoms of dependence as other people. There are type 1 and type 2 alcoholics and addicts, okay? A type 1 alcoholic is a person who has to work to get addicted. When they drink and use drugs the first time, they don't tend to get their tolerance is a lot lower. They tend to get sick. They throw up if they drink too much. They feel uncomfortable being high. They don't really like that feeling that much. But if they work at it long enough, anybody can get dependent, right? Other people are type 2 alcoholics and drug addicts. And those are people that they usually have, especially men, they usually have men in their family that have been addicted, okay? And the first time they drink and use, they love it, okay? And they can drink more than other people and use more than other people. And when they wake up the next morning, they don't tend to have as many hangovers. And they cannot wait to do it again, okay? And that was me at 10. Like, it's immediate loss of control. Okay, when you use. Okay, when you use. It's like you put it in your body and you're just like, oh man, I just want to keep going until I'm either totally messed up, passed out, the drugs or alcohol runs out, or the money runs out, or they kick me out, right? Okay, that's a type 1 kind of person. And I used to think that meant that I was like tougher, right? Like I'm a two-fisted drinker, a two-fisted user. I can get up the next day, I have no hangovers, I have whatever, and I just thought it meant I was stronger. And a really good friend of mine in recovery, she said to me one time, she said, you know, Chris, some people are born without the ability to feel pain, right? They can't feel pain, and they wind up crippled in life because they walk around on broken feet, torn ligaments. You know, they get sick and they don't know they need to go to the doctor. They die younger, and they usually wind up crippled. And she said, if you drink to the point where you're poisoning yourself and you can't feel it, that's not an asset. That's actually a liability. And you get addicted faster because you can't feel it, because you put more of it in your system, right? And I said, oh, I thought it was a sign of like, I'm badass, okay? I'm like my dad, I can drink, you know? And she says, that's not a healthy thing. If you're drinking or using that much, you should feel sick the next day. You should wake up and feel like a truck hit you. I'm like, oh, that ain't me. I get up the next day and I'm ready to go, okay? At the beginning. Now, later stage, when your body starts breaking down, you don't feel the same way the next day when you wake up, okay? But, so let's look at the differences here. Using is just like it says on the sheet here. Did you get one of these here? Yeah, you did. So using refers simply to using alcohol or other forms of drugs. Some people can use and never have any problem with it at all, okay? Abuse is a pattern or a history of substance abuse where you start having impairment or you're having some distress or problems, and you have one or more of the following, where you continue to use the substance and it makes you not able to fulfill your major roles at like work, with your family, social obligations, like you can't show up to work on time. It starts interfering with your ability to get to work, or like if you're in school, to do your schoolwork, or to parent, or to do the things that you need to do, okay? It can also be where you have substance abuse where it's physically hazardous. Drinking and driving, right? A lot of people never get DUIs, but how many people like have DUIs and should have had more than one? Okay. Like, there are so many nights that I remember getting in the car and getting out of the car, but I don't remember driving in between, you know? I remember getting in the car and then waking up the next morning in my bed naked going, whoa, how'd I get here? Oh, that's embarrassing, you know? And so where you just go, I don't remember anything in between. So a lot of us should have had more than one negative consequence. I would wake up and hear things about accidents and go out and check my car to make sure that I didn't hit anybody, you know, the night before, okay? Putting yourself in dangerous situations is another one, like I had a friend once said, you know, Chris, he goes, you know what's scary is going down to the hood and trying to negotiate a rock with $10 in your pocket. And, you know, he said, I could do it. He says, but people get pissed. You know, like, what are you doing coming here with $10? You know, you're not getting a ride for $10, you know, whatever, you know. And he says, you ever been to crack house, Chris? Where, you know, like, I was keeping my back to the door or to the wall so that I can make sure I can see what's coming in. You know, someone starts firing off some caps somewhere, I'm getting out, right? So they're like putting yourself in dangerous situations that way. All right. If you have continued legal problems, okay, and using despite social and interpersonal problems, like it causes fights, arguments with the people that care about you and things like that. So some people say, well, I never got arrested. And I say, well, you know, abuse can just mean that abuse tends to be more like binge drinkers and users. You ever met people like that? Like they can go for long periods of not drinking and using, and then they say, yeah, but when they go use, they put themselves at risk and have negative consequences.